Okay, buenos días. Good morning to everyone. And we'll make a start. I can't believe it is day 4 already. So it's gone very quickly, or it has for me. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time today. Today we're going to be looking in detail at diversity and difference, with particular reference to women and women in science, but also some of the other issues that cross over into that as well. And I'm going to just take a couple of minutes just to say my experience with Advanced HE, because I'm an associate with them, but I've also experienced them being in a university as their client in the past. And I wasn't sure if people were aware. I wanted just to take a few minutes to say that it's a specific organisation for a charity for education and training for higher educational professionals. And so it has different parts, and there are some parts that are very relevant, I think, to what we're talking about. To have this kind of organisation is a really strong thing for us to have. So one of those things is fellowships, which gives a real professional recognition. It's a validation of professional practice and experience, and there are four categories of that: associate, fellow, senior fellow, which is for a senior academic who can demonstrate impact and influence in their subject area or in their country. And also principal fellow, where it's about strategic leadership and international impact. So it has a fellowship system, but it also has a lot of training and mentoring programs. And one of those, I think there's a couple that are worth mentioning. One is called Aurora. And Aurora is an initiative that brings together leadership experts throughout the UK. And it addresses this underrepresentation of women in leadership positions. And I think we heard yesterday from our speaker and the day before, really, that this is not just a Peru problem. It is a problem everywhere, and we're all at different stages of how we've tackled that and addressed that. And the Aurora program is an intensive program aimed at change makers in institutions who want to make those systematic changes to develop female leaders. And it gives them helps to give them a compelling business case for their organisation about why it's important. So since the beginning in 2013, more than 7,000 women in the UK from about 200 different universities have taken part in that programme. And so they form their own cohort, and they form their own peer mentoring group as well at that very high strategic level, up to vice chancellors of universities. And following that sort of success of the Aurora programme in the UK, it's now been launched as an international programme. So there's been one complete programme in the Republic of Ireland and a pilot also in the Gulf states. So those are the kind of support schemes that one of them. And one of the other aspects of Advanced HE's work is the Athena Swan Charter, it's called Athena Swan, and it's a framework that's used across the globe, actually, internationally, to support and transform gender equality within higher education and research. And that was first established in 2005, and it's a charter mark. So it's a badge of quality, and there's bronze, silver, and gold levels, and it could be for the whole university, or it could be for a department. And it's encouraging and recognising a department or a university's commitment to advancing the careers of women in science, technology, engineering, maths, medicine, or at least that's how it was set up originally. And now it's perhaps more broad than that, looking across higher education in general. So I just wanted to mention those two very strong tools that we have to encourage and support professionalism in general, but also specifically for women in the industry and in research. Okay, that's enough of me on my soapbox, but I think it's important to have those kind of initiatives running. as a background to everything else that is going on. I'm going to now share my screen, I hope. Okay, so just looking back over yesterday, and we talked a lot about skills and mentoring for skills, and we had the very useful session, I think, from our guest speaker. And we'll have a slightly different format today, but some of the same elements. And I think some of the things that were coming out from the negotiations and negotiating about time and resources and those kind of things are also important. So I think those were some good sessions from what I could hear and see and read from yesterday. And today we're going to look more specifically at gender, and in particular but diversity and difference in a wider context as well, and why it's important. I hope that there isn't too much information on this because it has quite a lot of technical language. I'm hoping that it will make sense and that we can go through this. But I'm sure that you also have a better understanding of the nuances that exist within Peru, because undoubtedly it's a very different culture and a different education system as well. Okay, so I want to try and look at and improve the recognition of difference, particularly in relating to women, to improve an increased understanding of difference and knowledge of what I would call diversity literacy, and I don't know if that, I hope that translates, but being familiar with some of the language, understanding in particular unconscious bias and how that affects our work, and why some of the reasons perhaps why women are underrepresented within higher education, and also an understanding of microaggressions. I think those are very important to understand. So we're going to do this initial session. I'm going to do this first fairly longish session on diversity and difference, and looking at information and how we can move through that, particularly with regard to women. And then we'll have a break, more group work, and then there's a small task that I want you to do that's just for you. It doesn't have to be shared, but I hope it will make you think, and a break. Then we'll do the microaggressions and bias, and then I've got a video that one of my colleagues has made specifically for you, and I'm going to do also an interview with another colleague, or ex-colleague, who has had an interesting career change, and how that is for a woman in what is probably the most unequal of all the professions, I think, of all the disciplines. So that's the sort of a rough plan for the day. So I'm going to start with looking at diversity, and this thing that I'm calling diversity literacy. So exactly what do we mean by diversity, equality, discrimination, and thinking about that, thinking about how it changes over time and place. So if you think about Peru today, or London 1,000 years ago, or China, or wherever, at different periods of time and in different locations, our understanding of these words changes. And so it's, I think my message would be, where the equality and achieving equality is a process, it's a road, and it's ever evolving and ever changing. So in terms of diversity, I'm going to take it as meaning a mix, a melange, a range of people or things, and difference. So I just want to go through some of the concepts and how I will be using them today. So that's my definition, or the things that I think about when I think about diversity. And when I think about equality, I'm thinking about not everyone being the same, but everyone having similar chances in life, similar opportunities in life, regardless of their gender, their ethnic origin, their race, their age, if they have a disability. So regardless of all of these characteristics that make up our lives, that everyone should have that equal opportunity. And discrimination, I'm going to think of treatment that's based on a stereotype, really. Treatment that's based on what we think about a group or a group of people rather than the individual. That we consciously or unconsciously attribute characteristics to a group, which may or may not be true. And because of that, we can see discrimination, and that can be direct discrimination or indirect. And there are differences, and we'll look at that. I think there are 4 steps that we're going to look at in trying to, whether it's possible to achieve total equality, but in trying to achieve equality, there are 4 steps that I see, and that would be legislation, understanding data, and as scientists, I'm sure we're all happy to look at data, taking action and giving things time. We are not going to be able to change things today, tomorrow, next week. I think we can make small steps, but things take time. And I'm hoping if I can show some comparisons of some data, that will become perhaps obvious. So in terms of achieving equality then, I think complete social equality is difficult to achieve. We have to work at it, and everyone has to work at it, and it's a continuous process. Our legislation is there to ensure that it's promoted, but the law is just a basis. It's just it's the first step in a way. And I think if people think about their own cultures, and I wouldn't presume to tell you about your own culture, but maybe you have laws about equal pay or equal opportunity or equal rights for sexuality, and you have the law, but in practice, on the ground, those things are much harder to implement and to succeed. So I think legislation has that base value, and then we also all have to work on that, and it's everyone's responsibility to work on that. So certainly in terms of women, I think that, the legislation in terms of equality is there, but it's perhaps not always, doesn't always have a quick enough or a complete action. And why should we care? Why should we bother? I think there are, again, 3 things really. There's the legal requirement, and they vary over time and place. So we have laws, but that's dependent on where we are in the world, where we are in time, where we are in a context. But there is a legal basis that we should be doing this, and there are laws that support it. There's the social justice case. Fairness is the right thing to do. But there's also, I think, a really strong business case, because why would we lose 50% of our population's brain power by discriminating against women, for example? And that's to do with a whole range of things. You can think of all sorts of technology, IT technology that's been developed largely by men, and takes no account of women using interfaces and perhaps how people see things differently, and not just women, but a whole range of different people. Or you can think back to car seat belts. When safety belts in cars were first developed, they were developed by men, and they were trialled by men, and they were tested on men, and they're completely in the wrong place and for women originally. And now that we have a bit more flexibility, they fit our bodies better. And that's the same for many, many things. In this pandemic, we've had lots of problems with PPE with the protective equipment that has not been built for different shapes of people and different types of people. If we exclude people from the processes, and if we exclude women in this, which is what we're really talking about in this course, we're losing that half of that aspect. So I think we lose creativity, we lose talent, and we need to think more widely and think about other ways of working. So for me, there are those three angles of why we should bother and why we should try to change things. And in terms of working towards equality, number one, equal does not necessarily mean the same. I think that's really important. We all have rights, and because women want equal rights or more rights, that doesn't mean to say that someone has to give up rights. Rights are they're not a fixed thing. We can all have them. We have to trade some rights off against each other, but it's not a fixed pot. And I think in order to improve, we have procedures. We could think about procedures. We would say in England, I hope it's the same, a level playing field. So that, so if you're thinking about football, we're not on a slope and someone's playing downhill and someone's playing uphill. So we have a level playing field and we can put processes in place. We can look at an outcome. We can look at the end point and think everyone gets the same share of a cake. There are different ways that we can think about working towards equality. Or we can think about social justice, about removing barriers, removing bias. And I think there are three different ways of working and they all have benefits, but I'm hoping that I'm going to show you now my pictures that will try and explain perhaps a little better what I mean. And it being United States Thanksgiving Day, I've chosen, my pictures are about baseball. So so I think if you think about procedures, okay, I have my resources. I can see Mercedes. I have you can think about procedures for this level playing field. I have my 3 boxes and everyone gets one. But sadly, it doesn't really solve the problem. So it's not about equal is the same. Okay. Or you can think about outcomes. I have still my same 3 boxes, but I share my resources differently. And it solves that problem. And it solves that problem, but only for that time. So if we think about that, it's another step along the way. And different situations take different steps. And we often think about this when we're looking perhaps at students in our universities who have different needs, about how we support them. But the ideal would be what I would call social justice, where we solve the problem for all time. We don't have to keep giving out boxes. We could just take the barrier away or use it differently. So I think this is the way that I like to think about trying to remove those barriers. And that's why mentoring for women will always be different than mentoring for men, because we face different challenges and different barriers. Mentoring, there will be many things that are the same, but there will be some things that are obviously different. So this is the social justice, the no barriers, the no need for extra accommodation or extra support is the thing that we would aim for. But it obviously can also be the most difficult. And it doesn't happen overnight. Okay. So once we've thought about the legislation and the thoughts and how we might work towards this, I think we need to understand the data. And again, I'm sure you will understand the Peru data much better than I do. I've tried to look at it, so thanks to Justicia and the website and some other government sources that I've been looking at to try and understand the data as well. And this is the 2020 data. And there's obviously, in terms of researchers, a very large preponderance within Lima, the capital. And that's another form of equality. I don't know whether it's true in Peru, but where I live in the UK, I've worked at a countryside university in Aberystwyth, near where I live. We are way out on the west coast. We are miles from anywhere. The population of the town is about 16,000 people, and we have 9,000 students on that. So the university and the town are the same, really. And we say that the resources are all in the cities. So this is another form of equality, maybe. I don't know. I think it probably is the same in Peru. I guess it's the same in most places. But this may be another aspect of the rural, the countryside, the remoteness from the seat of government, the ear of government where you can influence things. This is another aspect of inequality potentially. So I've taken I was looking at those 5,500 or so researchers and just looking at women and men. And how that's split. And that got me thinking a little bit more about the comparisons within the UK and what this is telling me. And I know we gather data slightly differently and we have different titles and the way things are set up in universities. So I looked at the 2019 that I had for the UK. So I've got women and men and others, because from 2019 onwards, people have been able to declare their gender as not men. They can say men, women, or they don't want to declare either. So that's why there's a third row in our data. And in terms of academic, they're the sort of junior academics and associates, there's the senior, and then there's the professorial, which is like the highest level. And I think when I look at the professorial, the relationship is very similar, or perhaps even worse than the overall Peru position. However, when you look back at the junior staff, it's fairly equal. So it's the same data. So we're looking here where we are fairly equal between men and women at those lower levels. And I think that is because it's the time lag, because we have worked very hard at mentoring female students in high school. We've looked at undergraduate students and mentored women as undergraduates. And then we have these specific programs that look at women academics and researchers. And as time goes on, we hope that this equality will move upwards through the stages. But it's a slow process. As I say, it takes time. And it shows this, we have to be careful that we don't have that thing that I said right at the beginning about the leaky pipeline for women. There are a lot of reasons why women can disappear if they don't get the right support at different stages of their career, and they don't get the mentoring and the role models that they need. Yes, so our other category is so small that you can't even see it on my scale. But that's another aspect of equality that we are only just starting to work on. And again, I think if we come back in 20 years or 30 years, then we would start to see much more information on gender and sexuality coming through it into our data. So I was sort of looking at age as well, and age over time, just to see if I was thinking on the right sort of lines with regard to Peru. And so I said, you know, women in terms of the highest professor category, it's only 27% within the UK, but those lower levels are 49% to 51%. And so we must make sure that this goes and we move through. So I've looked also at the rest of the location. And it seems to me there's not too much difference between Lima and the rest of the country, although the levels are slightly better in Lima than the rest of the country, which is probably something you would expect, I imagine. That the opportunities within the city and the capital are better. So that's something that needs to be thought about in terms of when you're working towards equality and moving towards this. And I've also looked at age. So this is again in Peru. So we've got the age range of those 5,500 investigators. So thanks again to Consultech for the data for this. And we have this nice shape with the greatest between 40 and 49 and some 90 plus at the end there. So I wanted then to break that down and look at men and women to see. And I think if you look at the difference between male and female, between the age ranges, again, it's fairly consistent. We're not seeing, you might expect, if there has been a lot of equality work done and for gender, that you might expect these at the lower end of the scale to be more equal. And I think that's what we're seeing in the UK now. So I guess what I'm saying is it takes a long time and it takes work and it takes active intervention to make these things happen. If we sit back, it just will remain the same. I'm certainly not saying, please don't misunderstand me, that we've got it right in the UK. We definitely haven't. We're just a little bit further along maybe in this particular area. And you will know your situation. I wouldn't dare to try and teach you about your situation over hours. I know that there's some new legislation, I think, come up in 2019, which is about Peru prepares for 2030, where it's looking at gender equality and looking particularly gender balance within your government and within your ministries and departments, which is great, and that trying to achieve levels of pay equality and trying to do reduction to domestic violence and violence against women as well. And that's all tied up in that legislation. And that's that legal baseline that I talked about. And we have to, again, you will know these kind of examples better than me, I'm sure, but I was interested to read some of this information and inform myself about what's happening elsewhere. Although my interest in talking to you, of course, is specifically about mentoring for women and the reasons why, and I think the data shows us why, I think you also have to look at some of those other aspects of equality, including religions, ethnicities, disabilities, sexuality, because these all, we're not just one thing or another, we have a whole range of characteristics. And so I'm just, again, to try and make a comparison, over the years in the UK, we've had a lot of different legislation. We had Equal Pay Acts going back 20, 30, 40 years. We've had Disability Acts to try and make services accessible for disabled people. We've had all sorts of little Race Equality Act, all different pieces of legislation. But when it got to 2010, we had this global overarching policy and then law that looked at equality holistically. And it kind of swept up all those previous pieces of bits of legislation into one overarching act. And because we are 4 nations within the UK, each nation interprets them slightly differently. So Wales, where I live, Wales has its own language, and that's part that they've woven that into the Equality Act in Wales to protect that language. So it's the right of anyone living in Wales to receive information, particularly from the government and that kind of thing, in the Welsh language as well as in English. So although it's an overarching one, it's interpreted slightly differently, and that may be something that might be applicable in other areas as well. And we have these 9 characteristics. I won't dwell on it too long because it's more interesting in your own country, but we have these 9 protected characteristics in terms of age, disability, and so on and so on, as you can see. And so it legislates for discrimination, direct or indirect, for goods and services, and in education, and specifically in higher education as well, for all of these characteristics. And that's swept all of the previous legislation into this one overarching act. So I was trying to look at, so I was looking at gender, and obviously looking at age groups and those kind of things, and the rural, the countryside versus the city. And I also wanted to look at, obviously looking at ethnic origin. So again, thank you to the data that was made available, just to try and understand how the makeup of your country. And again, I'm sure you're much better aware of this than me. And I picked up that there's a purpose to where I'm getting to with this. I was also looking at the approximate rate for entry into university of the population. 16%, I think in UK we're somewhere around about 45%, so it's a different thing. So I understand that entry into university is much more competitive within Peru, with entrance exams. You also have the 2 types of universities, and the public and the private. Again, something that I didn't really understand before. But this leads me to think about where you have a fairly selective system. You have to consider this intersectionality. So this is why I was looking at some of the other aspects, and I'll define intersectionality as I am using it in a minute. But if you think about women, and then women who are ethnically indigenous or minority groups, and they're in the countryside, and they're disabled, for example, then that intersectionality of different types of discrimination can build. So we can't just look at one thing. It's important to also look more widely, I think. So this concept of intersectionality, where a person or a group of people are affected by a number of disadvantages that compound one on top of each other. And it takes into account people's overlapping identities, where they have, we are not just one thing. So although we can really think about women, and that's, I think, is for me the first step, there are lots of other influences that we also have to take into consideration. And in terms of intersectionality, it's personal. I bring myself, I bring my background, I bring my age, my gender, I bring everything with me to anything I do, whether it's my work, my life, my work, my hobbies, my interests. And it's really important to acknowledge this. When you're thinking about recruitment and training and mentoring, it influences how people see the world. And it influences how I see other people. It influences how the world sees me. It influences how I see other people. So I've just thought about the data and some of those ideas that have come out of the data that I was looking at in Peru. So we have the law, We have to understand the data so that we know what we're up against in terms of trying to make things more equal. And then we need to take some actions as well. And as I've said, there's also time. It is not going to happen tomorrow. It's already overdue, but it's not going to happen tomorrow, I would say. So just some very basic things that I think: language matters. And we can take personal action. So that might be male or female, doesn't matter. We can all take personal action. We can call out bad practice when we see it. You don't always have to leave it up to the women to point out that things aren't right. We need allies from all sectors and all sections. We can support events. Again, I think probably across the world, we celebrate International Women's Day on the 8th of March, everywhere in the world, and I guess you do too. But maybe it's only a sector of society, or maybe it's only the women who celebrate it. I'm not sure. But this year, 2021, they're using a hashtag choose to challenge. And that might be something that you want to take on, to think about that, to challenge inequality. And they also, the UN is also looking at achieving equality in a post-COVID world, because I think there's a lot of data and research out there now that women have suffered more in terms of work, in terms of extra burden of childcare and education at home and all of those things. So I think women have taken on a lot of the burden of what's happened to our world in COVID. So I think International Women's Day on the 8th of March can be a real day of celebration. But there are lots of other events, and you will have particular role models within Peru and particular female figures that you can celebrate, and to make a point of doing that. And to support the individuals as well by mentorship would be my key message, obviously, today and this week. But there can be systemic changes as well. So recruitment and selection changes, how that's done. Training, mentoring, as it says there. So recruitment and selection by making sure that promotion panels, if you have to sit before a panel for promotion, that there are diverse people on that panel. There's lots of systemic changes that can be made. So again, is it important? I'm going to come back to that point. I want you to just think that what I'm saying is equal but different. We celebrate the differences, but we try and be equal in terms of opportunity. And I say again, gender equality is not just a female issue, it's everyone's responsibility. We need to accept that and work in that way. And thinking about things like particular barriers, well, maternity and paternity, it's not just about, it shouldn't just be about the biology. We need to take on more responsibility more equally, perhaps. I'm speaking about this from the UK's perspective. I assume it's probably the same in Peru. And we have culture and religions and race and ethnicities, and they are all an integral part of who we are. They can be time and place specific, as I said at the beginning, and they are always evolving. The things we're thinking about, the awareness that we have, hopefully we are all evolving. So does it matter? I think this is key, to express my difference, our difference, to not have to hide parts of ourselves. It means that we can be more open, we can be more productive, we can be a better student, a better lecturer. And if we understand other people's difference, and the differences, particularly in the context today, men and women, it means that we can excel, we can innovate, we can be more creative. We can be free to take the advantages of all of that talent. And that's for the individual. I think that the benefits are clear, but there are benefits for the organisation as well. you're going to gather different viewpoints at all levels of your organization. You're going to attract and keep the best talent. You're going to avoid the cost of losing recruitment of women. The cost of recruiting new staff, if you're losing women at different points throughout the hierarchy, throughout the system, it's costly. And I think we should see increased effectiveness and increased success, because we are seeing this wide range of thought processes and this wide range of creativity and talent. So it's benefit for the individual, but there's a cost business case, there's a benefit for the organization and then for society as a whole. It's quite a long and heavy session, I think, but I wanted to talk through some of those things about why I'm passionate about this. And not to preach from the UK, because you will understand your situation and you've got a lot of very strong women that I can see on my screen. But we all need to be aware, and we all need to work towards it. It is not just the women's problem. We need to be in partnership for this. Okay, so that's the end of that section, and I hope it was useful and made you think a bit as well. So we're going to have a break in a moment. As always, get up and do the pulse, or whatever Patricia called it, and then go into the group sessions. Go to group sessions for about 30-35 minutes, then to come back into the main room to do a bit of feedback. And I want to talk you through a task that I'd quite like you to do just for yourselves, just on your own, with another with another break after that. And the groups, the breakout groups, are going to be about diversity, obviously, and thinking about your team and your workplace. Think about the diversity and the difference within your teams or your wider institution, in terms of gender, but in terms of other aspects. What do you do and what could you do to improve this? So I hope the facilitators will make some notes and use the talks and recording chat functions. 1 or 2 minutes of feedback per group when we come back would be really useful for me to be able to hear some of that. Is that all okay? So we have 10 minutes break, and then, so it's just about 3 o'clock, isn't it? So 3:10 or thereabouts. I see you soon.
Okay, thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
There is an excellent discussion in the chat, so we have to be sure that we record it.
Yes, I can see this. I'm going to look at it while you are doing group work.
Yeah, well, several of the things, I mean, one of the strategies that we are also thinking is to have a network of women in science, because the names are there, but we haven't connected. So this is kind of like one of the very first and interesting opportunities of connecting.
On to the chats, I'm very excited. So I hope you had some good discussions going on. I just want to pick up a couple of things that there's been a lot of discussion, it seems, about power and regionalism and problems in the government and underestimating ability of women. And these are all things that I can't do anything about, but you can. These are difficult conversations, and we have to have difficult conversations, because if we keep avoiding it, nothing ever changes. So there are discussions of power and privilege and recognizing our privilege ourselves. And there are people, there's some comments that, why are we worrying about women getting to be professors when 6 out of 10 women in Peru suffer violence? But we're smart, and if we use all the talent, we can do more than one thing at once. We don't only have to concentrate on one thing. We're smart people, and if we use everyone, we can solve more than one problem at a time. So Someone else has mentioned about education. Surely that is the most basic thing. Absolutely, I agree with that too. And you do need to start early. But the universities, I guess it's the same, or the colleges, train the teachers. So there's another impact of making sure that the syllabus and the curriculum for training primary teachers and secondary teachers includes all of this material. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. So are we going to have a minute or so of feedback from the groups? And you'll have to volunteer because I don't know who was in which order, or whether, but I'd be really interested to hear some of that conversation. Is there a volunteer in a group? Just to give a flavour of the, someone's got their hands raised, but I can't see it. So if we may have to unmute people.
Violeta. Hola, yo podía,
Hola.
si nadie quiere. Hola, Debra. No sé si debería hablar en español o en inglés, o si da lo mismo. Should I talk in English or Spanish? You're muted, Debra.
If you speak in Spanish, I can get a translation.
Okay, good. Yo estaba facilitando el grupo 3 y hemos tenido muy buenas reflexiones, pero claramente el tiempo estaba un poco corto. Éramos 35 personas en la sala para poder escuchar a todos. Pero quería mencionar 6 puntos que hemos tocado. Y el primero es uno que no deberíamos olvidarnos, que es simplemente también el desafío de nivel de educación distinto en zonas rurales y urbanas dentro del país. Y que eso también es distinto, la separación entre zona rural u urbana en la costa, en la sierra y en la Amazonía, que tiene un impacto a la relación, digamos, y cuántas mujeres desde un contexto interétnico, intercultural, están en las universidades y participando. Ahí hemos tenido, y eso es el segundo punto, muy buenas experiencias aparentemente de la inclusión del aspecto intercultural en las universidades en términos de estudiantes y de investigadores desde las comunidades, como también la reflexión acerca de tener alcaldesas, mujeres en funciones de alcaldesas, entonces en el poder. Pero claramente yo había hecho la pregunta que no hemos podido discutir más acerca de cómo podemos promover, digamos, el aspecto de mujeres y interseccionalidad en relación con interculturalidad fuera de un contexto rural o de un contexto urbano regional a algo mucho más visible, por ejemplo, en la capital de Lima y en mayores universidades. De ahí hemos hablado justamente en el mismo sentido de promover la etnicidad y la participación de personas de un contexto intercultural étnico diverso en las universidades con puestos de responsabilidad. Y eso me lleva a otro punto. Hemos hablado del desafío de generaciones y diferentes generaciones y todavía discriminación, lo que también hemos visto en Inglaterra, digamos que a nivel de los profesores más altos, todavía son mayormente varones que están tomando en estos puestos y no mujeres. Y ahí creo que el aspecto de interseccionalidad aún está mayor, pero no hemos tenido tiempo de entrar ahí en detalles. Pero eso estaba mencionado también.
Gracias.
Uno más.
We run out and
Okay.
Oh, quickly.
Que ha sido mencionada la importancia no solamente de mentoring, digamos, sino también de involucrarlo también con políticas públicas, de trabajar en diferentes niveles.
Thank you. Gracias. Is there Patricia, I can see your hand. Great.
Yeah. Okay, so la persona que va a hablar en realidad es Josefina de mi grupo, del grupo 2. ¿Le pueden por favor quitar el Gracias. Josefina.
Ya, ahora sí. Sí, gracias por la oportunidad. En realidad, en el grupo, lo interesante fue que de las 9 personas, creo que participamos en la conversación, solamente fue un varón el que, entre ellos hubo solamente un varón. Y era un varón bueno, que joven y que con ideas diferentes, diríamos, a lo que expresaron las mujeres en general, sobre los problemas que han tenido, sobre todo, tanto para avanzar académicamente, ¿no?, como para luego avanzar, diríamos, en cuanto a responsabilidades y cargos dentro de su centro de trabajo. Creo que eso ha sido un problema que no se ha dado en todos los casos, por supuesto, porque, como se ha dicho, todo depende de la actitud de la misma persona, de la mujer, y también del ejemplo que uno puede dar, ¿no?, y de la preparación que uno tiene, porque indudablemente para poder avanzar se necesita una serie de elementos, ¿no? No es cuestión solamente de por ser mujer, ¿no?, en qué situación se encuentra. Luego también se conversó sobre el tema que en muchos casos hay celos profesionales, y que esos celos profesionales a veces provienen incluso de otras mujeres, ¿no? La importancia muy grande que hay en el desarrollo profesional de una mujer es la pareja. Indudablemente, ¿no?, dependiendo de la pareja que uno escoja, y eso es un mensaje que incluso se dijo que debería ser transmitido a sus mentoreadas. ¿Por qué? Porque es un factor muy importante para el futuro de su vida profesional. Saber con quién exactamente, si comparten los mismos ideales, para poder trabajar juntos en su desarrollo personal e individual, como también definir bien cómo lo van a hacer, porque es complejo cuando vienen los hijos, etcétera, etcétera. Como digo, en términos generales, el tema de la diferenciación también entre universidades públicas y privadas en el Perú, en cuanto a la forma como se trabaja el tema de discriminación, o si lo ponemos en el otro lado, de la no discriminación y el contexto de diversidad, es también variable, y también varía si es en una universidad del interior del país con una universidad de la capital. En resumen, esos son los puntos más importantes que se han tratado en la reunión. Gracias.
Gracias. Hubieron una serie de comentarios también en el chat. Y básicamente, o sea, resumiendo, se habló acerca de barreras individuales, se habló acerca de barreras estructurales, pero una cosa que también se habló es que no solamente, y creo que Josefina lo ha mencionado, ¿no? No solamente hay, digamos, barreras masculinas, sino también hay zancadillas de mujeres contra mujeres por esas cuestiones de los celos. Y la importancia de tener modelos, o sea, lo que le llaman role models, modelos de mujeres que puedan hacer que otras mujeres jóvenes sientan que pueden ir más arriba, pero también la importancia de que las mujeres finalmente, cuando llegan a niveles superiores, permitan abrir puertas para otros. No sé si alguien del grupo quisiera agregar algo más. En realidad los 35 minutos fueron bien
That's a
cortos.
really, really good point. Yeah, we are very, it is very short, and I agree. I think it's the thing that we say, you climb the ladder and you pull it up behind you if you're not careful. And for women, they must make sure that they pull people up behind them. Is there another group?
Yo puedo hablar, creo que es, no sé el número de grupo, creo que fue grupo 1. En realidad hubo mucha discusión, también se nos quedó cortas los minutos, pero para la primera pregunta fue interesante ver que existían, que varios de los investigadores mencionaban que por primera vez estaban haciendo una pausa para revisar cuál era la diversidad en su equipo, ¿no? Y sí se mencionó que hay diversidad socioeconómica, diversidad cultural, étnica y de género en distintas medidas, también se mencionó que hay carreras como física, matemáticas, en donde el número de incluso estudiantes, así uno trate de tener algo de diversidad, el número de estudiantes mujeres, por ejemplo, es muy, muy bajo aún, y que existe todavía una discriminación por edad, sobre todo a nivel ya de docentes universitarios, en donde a partir de cierta edad ya se siente una discriminación por pasar cierta edad. Y este era, digamos, el aspecto en cómo veían la diversidad en sus equipos, en sus áreas de trabajo. En cuanto a qué se puede hacer, es donde hubo mucha más discusión y hubo muchas propuestas, desde temas ya mucho más macros como empoderar a las mujeres desde niñas, capacitar a las autoridades para que entiendan cuáles son los beneficios de tener equipos diversos en las universidades, en las instituciones, hasta cosas más puntuales como ya poner incluso más atención dentro de sus propios equipos, promoviendo la diversidad, buscando activamente aquellas poblaciones de repente que podrían tener menos acceso a la oportunidad de ser parte de los equipos. Y salió también algo interesante que era tratar de integrar la investigación entre regiones, ¿no? Que se había mencionado en la charla que en Perú al menos hay mucha centralización todavía y que sería importante, por ejemplo, generar una base de datos de investigadores en diversas líneas nacional y que se permita, se ayude a generar esta integración entre grupos de investigación de diversas regiones. Eso es un resumen.
I thank you, gracias. I appreciate that it's short time, but it's exciting that you're having discussions and you can carry this forward again. It's a good basis. We have Zully?
Sí, con respecto a mi grupo, disculpen, yo di la palabra a un hombre, que es el que va a hablar, hemos hablado puras mujeres, pero a ver si Juan Carlos podría hablar de lo que tocamos en el grupo, y también visto de la perspectiva de un hombre joven, lo acabo de ver, y bueno, a ver Juan Carlos.
Buenos días con todos, mi nombre es Juan Carlos y bueno, hace un momento en la conversación en el grupo había diferentes perspectivas, visiones, argumentos sobre la igualdad de oportunidades, ¿no?, en el mundo académico. Mi ímpetu y mi voluntad de participar en este curso fue justamente porque esto impulsaba a que, o va a impulsar a que las mujeres haya más mentoría para las mujeres en la ciencia y la investigación. Yo le comentaba a los compañeros en el grupo que realicé una investigación en las zonas rurales hace algunos años para introducir tecnología en zonas muy alejadas para niñas y niños de zonas y de escuelas rurales, y me di con la sorpresa de que la capacidad o la diferencia de oportunidades en el campo es más marcada por un tema cultural, no por un tema de que el machismo es más complicado en el campo. Entonces, este tipo de investigación me llevó a darme cuenta de que las políticas públicas son muy importantes para cambiar las sociedades. No, un profesor hace un momento en el grupo decía de que todo está en la mente. No, en la mente puede ser que sea un punto de partida para respetar la igualdad de género, pero lo importante para que podamos llegar a una igualdad de oportunidades verdaderamente son las políticas públicas impulsadas por los estados. Si los estados no le ponen interés a la cuota de género en la ciencia, en la investigación, en la economía, en el ambiente, en la producción, en la minería, en la educación, entonces el país siempre va a tener esas diferencias en cuestiones de género, ¿no? Por más que nosotros como académicos, como investigadores, como personas que queramos impulsar desde nuestro punto de vista, de nuestro trabajo, la ciencia, es un tema estatal. Y el tema del Estado tiene que partir fundamentalmente de entender qué son las igualdades de oportunidades, de igualdad de derechos. Porque ahora hay muchos grupos, ¿no?, de personas que defienden sus derechos por diferentes formas de pensar. Hay que entender qué es lo que están buscando esos grupos, ¿no? Y justamente en el campo de la ciencia, lo importante es de que las mujeres tomen un punto más de impulso en la utilización de diferentes herramientas para que puedan manifestarse, sea tecnológica, sea socialmente, etcétera, ¿no? Para mí, creo que este tipo de cursos, la verdad que impulsan a que genere la agenda pública, que es lo más importante. Y la agenda pública va a llevar a que las políticas públicas después tomen un rumbo distinto con una cuota de más interés para la igualdad de oportunidades para las mujeres en la ciencia y en la investigación. Gracias.
Okay, gracias. Thank you for another perspective as well. And then I think is there one more group? Or was that? I've lost count now. Is there one more group? Or was that all?
No, es todos.
It's todos.
That's all,
Okay.
that's all.
Gracias.
There are only 4 groups.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Oh. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen again okay. So I wanted to talk at this point, just a few minutes, and I was going to give you a small task, but I'm conscious of the time. So we will have a short break, and if you want to think about the task, it was something that I think is valuable to do. And perhaps when you go on to be mentoring, it's valuable for your mentees to think about as well in terms of difference. Or if you're running a team session, I didn't want it was going to be purely personal, so I'm going to explain about it, and then you can either do it or not, or think about it later. So in terms of differences, there are these things that everyone knows about us. And then there are things that perhaps our close friends and colleagues or our closest family and a very few close friends know. And there may be some things that only you know about yourself. And I use, when we do this, we use a wardrobe, so a Mario, yes? And there are things on the outside, on the doors, that everyone sees. That I'm a woman, that I'm old, that I'm long hair, or there are those things that people see immediately. But when you open up the door, there are things that perhaps on the insides of the doors that you let some people see. And there are some things that you keep on the top shelf, out of the way, that only your close family know. That your close family know, or your very, very close friends. And then there may also be something hidden back behind all the clothes that only you know about you. And it's sometimes a useful, particularly when you're going to be a mentor, or you're going to be a role model, or you're going to be visible, that you think about these different aspects. So you can think about drawing yourself a wardrobe and thinking what you would put in each bit. So there are these different areas that we have, and think about your wardrobe and what you have and what you allow some people to see and what you keep closed. I think it's a useful exercise sometimes when we're thinking about differences. So I think we've had discussions about we should have a bit of an exercise break. I make it exactly, or in Peru, 11 o'clock. So can we come back to start by 10 past 11 straight on? And if you have some thought and have time to think about your wardrobe, you might want to do that.
Okay.
I think we should get up and have a bit of action. But I want to start dead on at 10 past 4. Thank you.
Entonces sería a las 11:10 nos reunimos. 11:10
Sí.
regresamos. Vayan a hacer un poco, por favor, pausa activa. Levántense, salten y se muevan. Gracias.
Sí. So I thought I would just share my wardrobe. So the things that you can see from the outside, and perhaps the things that are a bit more personal, but that most people who know me would know, and the things that not many people know, particularly la cerveza Mariscos. And then there's the other things which probably only I know. So this is my wardrobe, and it changes. And people, my colleagues and friends, move from inside and further inside the cupboard. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit now about unconscious bias. And so we're talking here about social stereotypes and the way that we think about an individual or a group based on just what we observe, not that we know them as an individual. And that's why the wardrobe is a useful tool, I think. And this is outside of our conscious awareness, and the bias there's more unconscious bias perhaps than explicit bias. I think it's the concept that we have about people that we make those decisions and we make those thought processes all the time, as soon as we meet someone within the first few seconds. But those are part of the systems that we can put in place there are systems that we can put in place to overcome them. We just have to recognize them. It's natural, everyone does it. We form that opinion. It's part of our makeup, it's part of who we are, and it's informed by our background, our culture, previous people we've met, our experiences. But it can make us make the wrong decisions sometimes, and it can hinder our attempts, it can stop our attempts to be fair or objective. And we particularly, I do a lot of training with people doing recruitment and promotion, to be aware of the people that they're seeing in front of them and not to make those kind of assumptions, but to acknowledge that they have a bias, and how they can put systems in place and question themselves to overcome that in some way, or at least to acknowledge it and see what they are doing. And there are lots of different types of bias. Bias in terms of perception, what you see immediately, things like affinity, that you recognize someone went to the same school as you, and that automatically makes you think of them perhaps more favorably. That we assume a natural connection with someone who came from the same town as us, which isn't necessarily true. And as scientists, we probably know about this as well. We have a confirmation bias that once we've made up our mind, we look for evidence to support our opinion instead of being open and objective. So there are lots of different types of bias, and a lot of them we do unconsciously all the time. But if we can try to understand that, then there are systems that we can put in place. And in this context, we're particularly thinking about a male and female and the assumptions that we make without thinking further and without going into depth. And you've in the discussions brought up, maybe there's a difference in some of the different areas of Peru and some of the different industries and some of the different sciences, or maths and science, what we would say hard science or soft science. Then maybe there are different biases that we bring to that and think about that. And it can affect all sorts of things. In our advertising, I'm thinking now about universities and advertising for courses. the pictures that we put in our publicity material, the pictures of scientists, do we show female scientists within our materials? To even when people are looking at a university, are there people like them? So there's it's part of our recruitment policies in terms of looking about who we would consider for promotions, perhaps. And it's in part of our syllabus, our curriculum, and our reading lists. Quite often we don't review our reading lists for students, and we need to think about what we're asking them to look at. And if it takes a bit more work to search out those publications made by women, then maybe we ought to be doing that, or at least making it more equal and more fair, so that the next generation come through can see that they can achieve those levels of publication. So there's the curriculum in terms of bias and all of these things that we do unconsciously in our busy lives, but to review those things and make conscious changes. And these are systematic changes that we can make. And in order to minimize the effect that bias can have. We can do cultural awareness training. We can personally try and meet a wider range of people outside of our comfort zones. We can examine ourselves and reflect, and then we can put in those systems. So like, as I was saying before, promotion panels or recruitment panels, we can make sure that the panel of 3 or 5 people interviewing will be drawn from different parts of our society. And they will see things differently, potentially. They will see different aspects of the person in front of them. So I think unconscious bias is something that, we need to be conscious of our unconscious bias. And try and acknowledge it and think about it and think about what that means for the people that we're in a position to be a role model for, or to be an ally, or to help or assist, whether that's in promotion or in recruitment, or the students in front of us. It might be that you're looking at students coming into your university and you see that their previous experience and their exams, they're fantastic at maths, but they're not applying for maths. And you might want to, you can have those conversations. What's putting them off? It may be because they don't think being a maths professor is for them, whereas that might be their best subject. So there are all sorts of levels that we can think about this. And then the other concept that I want to touch on now is the concept of microaggressions. And these are comments or actions that are sometimes, or mostly, meant to be well-meaning. They're often unintentionally difficult, as particularly for a member of a minority or a marginalized group. And if you are not a minority, or you are not part of a marginalized group, you will potentially not recognize this as a problem. They can be small things, and on their own, perhaps, they're tolerable. But when you have a continuous build-up of these throughout a day, if it's a continuous and it builds up throughout a day or a week or your career, you can cause huge distress. And I've just pulled out a few, perhaps, examples. So I'll just let you read those a moment. And on their own, they may be insignificant, but when you're faced with it time and time and time and time again, they build up. So this is another thing where language matters. So they can be well-meaning, as I've said, but they have this coded message behind them that perhaps we don't always recognize when we speak without thinking deeply. They can be subtle, And although the hurt is unintentional, that language really does matter. I've just picked out 3. These happen in all sorts of areas, and I've just picked out 3 aspects. So I'm going to look, for example, at intelligence. So you have a microaggression, which is what you're saying. And if you're in a minority group, this is what you might hear. This might be the message that you hear. And I know we could say, well, people just need to get more resilient, get stronger, ignore all these things. But if they become repetitive, it wears you down and it can be very tiring. So they're the things that question people's intelligence, perhaps. Or if you're look different than the majority for some ways, you are an alien in your own land, in your own country. We say one thing, but someone will hear something different in that coded message. And it's not just about what we speak and what we say, it can also be environmental, in terms of the things that we see and the signs around us. So whether that's on television and films, perhaps, or in publicity images, which I've already said about. And also just what you name your buildings, or what you name your university, or who you name places after. If all your science buildings are named after famous male scientists, that sends a message subliminally, but it sends a message. So there are lots of things that we can think about in terms of these little microaggressions, that just one of them may not be important, but where they build up, they can be very soul destroying, very tiring for a minority group. And there are solutions that we can put in place. So you can challenge, you can recognize them in yourselves and try to change how you speak and challenge your colleagues and think about your language. Reform questions, but quite often it's about talking to people. If there are people in front of you who you don't understand their culture or you don't understand their difference, then we need to have those conversations so that we can inform ourselves and learn more, so that you can teach yourself to think differently. So I wanted to cover those 2 parts of unconscious bias and also microaggressions, because they're part of that literacy around diversity and difference. And as we become more aware, we can then pass that on to our colleagues and challenge our colleagues in a supportive way to get them to change how they think as well. So partly it's an individual task, but it can also be by changing some of the systems and some of the signage, the publicity materials, all those other things as well, so that we are more open and perhaps more accessible. So I realise we're coming towards the end of the day. I wanted to bring in 2 people who I probably, you would say I've mentored for many years in some way. One of them, I'm going to actually play you a video. Dr. Christopher Lovell, he's a historian. He's a full member of the faculty, a full member of the faculty there. And he's an expert in widening access. He's actually recorded a small piece and it has Spanish subtitles. Largely, he's profoundly deaf. So this is another type of diversity that I thought it was worth bringing in. He's profoundly deaf. He never thought he would even finish school, let alone a degree, a master's degree, a doctorate, and is now a full-time lecturer, professor, and researcher. So I'm just going to stop sharing here and pick up my video if I can. It's only about 5 minutes.
Hello, I'm Christopher Lovell. I'm an historian and I have worked as a mentor for over 10 years. specializing predominantly in mentoring disabled students studying a variety of subjects from history, computer science to astrophysics. I've mentored international and domestic students, undergraduates and postgraduates, some for only a short period of time, some I mentored throughout their entire degrees, watching them start off as undergraduates and then progressing to doctorates. Mentoring can be incredibly rewarding to both sides. It has very distinctive benefits to both mentee and mentors. Being a mentee can really help students become much more organized. This can either be because the mentor is able to give specific advice to the student, or just because by having a regular meeting with a mentor, a mentee is given some structure to their day. Gentle reminders from the mentor can help encourage students to become much more aware of the need to plan their time. Many mentees who feel a bit isolated or lonely really benefit from having the chance to talk to someone who they know is going to be listening to them. Feeling like they are being listened to can really help improve their self-esteem, and students often know what they need to do after they've had the chance to verbalize their concerns. Mentoring can also help students who might face barriers, whether they are because of class, gender, disability, or race. Whilst not every barrier or issue can be resolved through one-to-one mentoring, you will be surprised by how just a few meetings can help imbue a student with more confidence. How meetings can give students a little more knowledge, self-esteem, and reassurance. This is particularly true for mentees who are the first in their family to go to university. It might seem like a simple thing, but a mentor who can help explain basic elements of university culture to a student can really help enhance a student's experience of university life. A mentor who can also signpost students to the right society and services, especially disability support or well-being services, can be invaluable to a mentee. Mentees also benefit from seeing a range of people working as mentors. By showing students that academics can come from a variety of different backgrounds or have a range of different disabilities can really help mentees feel more at ease. I believe that by being a deaf mentor myself, I helped some students feel more comfortable talking about issues they faced as disabled students, because there was an extra level of empathy and understanding between us. Being a mentor also has a lot of benefits for the staff too. Very broadly, mentoring can help improve your communication skills. The key to being a good mentor, I found, was to listen more than you speak. Mentoring can help to improve your communication skills by getting you to think about how to communicate as much as possible in as few words as possible, whilst ensuring that the conversation is firmly theirs. Being a mentor can also help improve your own confidence and interpersonal skills. The ability to talk to strangers in such a way that puts them at ease and makes them trust you quickly is a great skill in all aspects of life, and one you have to develop when you mentor. Mentoring an individual can often give you insights into a group. Whilst the problems a mentee are facing can be very idiosyncratic, a lot of the issues and concerns that they raise apply to a range of other people. Mentoring students helped me to get a better understanding of the wider concerns of students more broadly. This helped immensely when it came to developing courses and teaching, because it gave me an insight into student life long after I stopped being an undergraduate myself. Mentees can also raise issues that they face that you might not have encountered before or might not have been aware of before mentoring a particular student. This can really help you to get a better insight into the challenges different students face from a variety of backgrounds. I often found that much of the advice that I gave students was applicable to my own situation. But before being a mentor, I often gave very good advice which I never followed myself. As a mentor though, by talking through issues with a mentee step by step about how to manage their time, stress and workload often helped me to take a step back from my own issue and apply the same advice to my situation. Being a mentor can be incredibly rewarding too. You get a great deal of pride when you witness the achievements of a mentee and you are able to see them grow in confidence. These are just some of the benefits that I experienced as a mentor and some of the benefits that I saw mentees experience too. There is a wealth of other benefits that both parties will get through a strong, healthy mentoring relationship.
Hi Deborah, it's Bianca here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
I think there were a few comments in the chat just saying that the quality of the picture was a little bit blurry, so I think people may not have been able to read the subtitles as clearly. I was wondering if the link, if the video will be uploaded anywhere and we can share a link.
Okay, thank you. I apologise for that. My system went down, so I couldn't see the chat. So many apologies. So it's a recording that's on YouTube, but it's hidden. So when we email out tonight, we'll email that link. And there's also a transcript actually, which has been translated in Spanish. So I just wanted, so I apologise that the quality of that fell down. I'm not sure what happened there. Apologies. I'm hoping that my colleague, Hannah Clark, is
do you have another video or is only that one?
It's just that video, but I'm now going to be interviewing my colleague, an ex-colleague, I suppose I should say, Hannah Clark, who should be joining us.
Solamente para pedirle a las traductoras, porque esto se hubiera resuelto si la traductora hubiera traducido simultáneamente también el video. Por favor, va a haber ahora una conversación entre las dos, por favor, para que la traducción se dé de todas maneras y no nos falle, ¿sí? Y para todos, sí van a compartir el link del video que está en YouTube y además una transcripción de todo lo que ha dicho. Vamos a compartirlos, no se preocupen.
Okay. Aha, I can see you, Hannah. Okay, so my ex-colleague, I guess, Hannah Clark, who is a software engineer. I think we have a few questions that we're going to work through because I think it's useful to think. I've thought about this session as the most unequal of all the sciences in terms of gender. So for someone who has gone into an industry where that's a very obvious thing to be seeing, I wanted to bring her in to talk to you about some of her real life experiences and link that to mentoring as well. Just as a little bit of background, Hannah has an undergraduate degree in international politics. She then has a master's degree in glaciology. I don't know how that works. It's a bit of a change in career, but that's a bit of a pattern. It's something we probably share between us, that we've changed careers quite a bit. So she has a science degree, a master's degree in glaciology, looking at ice melt and so on. And at the moment is also studying for another degree in information technology, part-time, as well as working as a software engineer. So are you muted, Yanya? Can you unmute yourself? No. And, aha. Okay, welcome. First of all, can you explain to us a little bit about your experiences of diversity or lack of diversity within the tech industry?
Yeah, lack is probably the correct word to use. For context, I work in an engineering team of around 20 people, and I am the only female member of staff on our team. I've been working in my current company for the last year, and we haven't employed anyone else who isn't male. And the company itself has been running for just over 3 years, so I'm the first and only female engineer on the team. This isn't altogether unusual within the technology industry. There is a massive disparity in terms of gender diversity. It's quite a male-dominated area. The way that I actually got into working in software and training was through a course offered by a charity organization who were aiming to get more women into technology and into programming. Their aim was to train 20,000 people by 2020, which they've done, and it's a massive step in the right direction. But in terms of seeing those differences, it's not something that's very obvious right now. I'm very much one in a sea of men where I work, and that's the picture as well across the rest of the industry.
So in that case, could you give us a couple of the challenges that you see about working predominantly in a male environment as a single woman in that environment?
The team that I work with are really great. It's not kind of I don't sort of struggle with it every day in that I'm having to constantly fight to get my voice heard. They are very good. There are, however, some challenges, things that I might be told to do differently. I don't think my male colleagues would be told to do differently. For example, I recently had, we have sort of monthly feedback sessions on our performance. And one of the points was that I should speak up more in meetings. And I know for a fact that there are plenty of other people around the table who also don't speak up more, but I'm fairly certain that they aren't being given the same feedback. And I think it's because there's this misconception that I'm not saying something because I'm female and I don't feel that I can in that space, when actually it's that I'm the same as the others and that I don't feel I've got anything to add, and so I'm not talking for the sake of talking, which also a lot of my colleagues do on occasion, just to sort of fill silences, I suppose. So there are minor things like that. I think teams generally benefit from having people from lots of different backgrounds, from lots of different experiences, and when you have predominantly a group of white men, you get one kind of view of the situation. You don't have people who've come from different careers necessarily. A lot of the people I work with are graduates. We do have people who are career changers like I did, but it's not always common. So I think, in order to get better ideas and to get different views on things, particularly when you're developing projects and you're trying to put something together that benefits a broad range of customers, you need to have people who have those different experiences too, and that extends to gender and beyond.
So have you had any mentoring support within this in your role?
Yes, so everybody who works in the company is given a mentor when they start. So I was assigned a mentor. I did also, in order to kind of get into tech and to get a role, I had a mentor in someone who I'd met through a networking event, and he was very good at kind of pointing me in the right direction, giving me tips of where to look, and putting me in contact with other good people as well. But obviously these are, again, two men, so their experiences are quite different to mine. So it's useful in some ways, but and I think it is useful in that it gives you that kind of it's a person to sort of ask questions to who you wouldn't necessarily know where to ask otherwise. And particularly when you're changing careers, that's really important. I didn't know how things worked so much in within the private sector, for example, and in terms of the way that jobs work. So it was really useful to have someone with that experience to be able to ask those questions and to point me in the right direction.
So that leads me to ask then, do you look for female role models, or how do you look for female role models?
It's difficult at the moment in that previously there were a lot of kind of meetup events for women within technology, events within my area as well. There are a few of those. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to any in person, but there are still different things online. I've been to some events where it's interesting because not everybody comes straight from the I've done a degree and I've gone straight into technology route. There are a lot of people like me who were working in something different and may have maybe had a career change later on in their career. So it's really good to be able to talk to those women to see what their experiences were and to also see how successful they are. I'm only a year into this career, so it's quite challenging most days, and it's difficult being right back at the beginning of something again after sort of being, you know, the person in my last job who knew what was going on, to then be right back at the start and not have a clue what you're doing. It's useful to see people who've been through that and who are doing really well and are now passing on that experience to other people. So there are different networks and there are a lot of kind of online webinars and sort of networking groups available. So there are people out there who share those experiences and are willing to share them with others to help.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you for joining us, even for just a short time. I think it's useful to hear from that kind of perspective, because those are some of the things that we've been covering today. I'm conscious of the time that's ticking on, and we have some closing remarks from a couple of our colleagues. So again, thank you very much, and I will no doubt be speaking to you later anyway. So
did you want me to answer? There's one question in English in the chat that I could answer. I don't know what your process on questions
from Marcos. Okay, yes. Go carry on then. Yeah, well spotted.
The question is, do you enjoy yourself? It's quite rare to see a young female being a programmer. I do. I really do enjoy my job. It's very challenging, but I like that about it. There's always something new to learn. For example, for the past 3 days, I've been working on something with my team that just wouldn't work. And then this morning we finally managed to get it working. And that kind of joy of finally fixing something and finally solving a problem, I get a real kick out of problem solving. So yeah, and there's always, and I enjoy, I mean, as Deborah mentioned, I've got various different qualifications. I always enjoy learning. So it's good to be in a job where I am constantly learning something new as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, we will have to leave you. I've got loads more questions, or I'm sure we've all got loads more questions, but it's good to even have that brief insight of what it's like. So thanks very much. Speak to you later.
Thank you for having me on.
Great. Okay, I think that's more or less the end from me. We've been through quite a lot in these last 4 days, and I know that we have some people coming up to do some final closing remarks. As always, there will be a feedback quiz at the end of this session. So again, it would be really good if you could complete that. I'd be really grateful if you could complete that. And there will also be a parallel piece to an overall post-course questionnaire, similar to the one that you took before you started the course. What happens next? A lot of that is up to you. So I wish you the very best of luck, and I really hope that some of the conversations that have happened and the connections that have been made are going to bring forth a lot of good work as you go forward. We will be following up with material, and all the material will be available to you. And we'll be analysing the data and also writing a report for Justicia and the British Council. And I believe we now have Dr. Beatrice Avolio from Koscheck, who is going to have some closing remarks, I think. Ah, yes. You've just appeared on my screen. Can you unmute now?
Ok, ahora sí, thank you very much. No podía desactivar mi micrófono. Muy bien, muchas gracias, muchas gracias. Bueno, tengo el gusto de dar estas últimas palabras, un poco como cierre de nuestro taller de formación de mentores voluntarios. Antes que todo, en representación del Comité Pro Mujer, donde se ha desarrollado esta iniciativa, y como presidente del Comité Pro Mujer, quiero, antes que todo, dar una felicitación a Concitec por el premio que acaba de tener en buenas prácticas. En realidad han sido 2 buenas prácticas en las cuales ha sido premiado Concitec. Uno a través de la práctica de mejora en productividad y competitividad de las empresas peruanas a través del programa de beneficios tributarios para proyectos de investigación científica y desarrollo tecnológico. Y esa es la primera mención que acaba de tener en el premio. El segundo también es la categoría simplificación de trámites. Así que nada, Concitec, nuestras felicitaciones como parte del comité por haber sido reconocidos en este tema de los premios a las buenas prácticas, ¿no? Estamos llegando pues a esta culminación de este esta parte de la formación de mentores, que es la primera fase en realidad de todo un proyecto integral de la institucionalización de la mentoría, digamos, como parte de la formación en ciencias, tecnología e innovación. Quiero agradecer antes que todo a las integrantes del Comité Pro Mujer, en particular a las doctoras Patricia García y Luz Paucar, quienes han sido dentro del comité las que han liderado, digamos, este tema y este proyecto y han trabajado muy duro para que esto se haga realidad. Segundo, por supuesto, a Concitec por este compromiso, ¿no?, que está teniendo con todas las diferentes iniciativas, no solo a crecer la ciencia y la tecnología y la innovación en el país, sino específicamente orientadas a mejorar y fortalecer la participación de las mujeres en CTI. Tercero, a British Council, que ha hecho realidad a través del financiamiento y apoyo que siempre da, a través de este taller y todas las posibilidades, digamos, de haber tenido estas mentoras, estas expositoras para efectos del desarrollo de este programa de formación. Una mención también a las felicitadoras que han trabajado pues tremendo en estos 4 días, ¿no? A Rebeca, a Tina, a Patricia, Fiorella, Dorín, Teresa, Zuli, que han estado pues totalmente dedicadas dentro de todas las actividades que tienen a poder estar al tanto y poder fortalecer al equipo expositor en este programa, ¿no? Y el más importante, al que le tengo que dar la felicitación, pues es a todos los investigadores que están acá con nosotros, en realidad. Son todos los investigadores que han decidido dar su tiempo y su espacio en estos 4 días en una actividad de preparación de ustedes mismos, pero sobre todo con la intención de que esta preparación pues se vea reflejada en otras personas, ¿no? En estos mentís que vendrán después, y que con este esfuerzo conjunto de mentores y mentís podamos ir intercambiando capacidades, conocimientos y haciendo crecer a otros investigadores o a otros profesionales o a otros universitarios en este proceso que es la ciencia y la tecnología, ¿no? La mentoría está demostrada en realidad en el mundo como una actividad y un mecanismo muy eficiente, muy efectivo para poder transmitir la práctica, para transmitir estas capacidades, para tener este apoyo desde emocional hasta técnico. Y en realidad quiero agradecerles a todos ustedes que han estado estos 4 días de diferentes partes del país, poniendo su tiempo, su espacio, y los comprometemos a que sigan en este programa de mentorías, que este es solamente la primera fase, porque es la fase de formación, pero vamos a seguir trabajando en las diferentes fases orientado pues a esta gestión institucional o implementación institucional de las mentorías. En realidad, muchas gracias a todos, a los equipos. Acciones como estas en realidad creo que son tremendamente positivas porque demuestran todo el esfuerzo gubernamental, profesional, privado, de la sociedad civil y todos para ir en pos de objetivos comunes. En realidad, hacerlo juntos es la única manera de lograr cambios. Y muchas gracias nuevamente a todos ustedes. Muchas gracias y que estén todos muy bien, cuídense. Y nuevamente nuestro saludo en representación del Comité Pro Mujer. Buenos días.
Sí, la foto del grupo, Que todos prendan su cámara.
I think we also have a speaker from British Council, just to finally round everything off.
Hola.
Ok.
Hola, perdón, no podía abrir mi micrófono. ¿Cómo están? Soy Adriana Delgado, gerente de Educación y Sociedad del British Council. También unirme a las palabras de cierre de Beatricia Abolio. Quiero iniciar esta breve intervención comentando algo que me ha impresionado, y es este grupo de mujeres y profesionales que se han comprado el pleito, como decimos, y que han estado detrás de bambalinas y al frente también del escenario haciendo posible este evento. Este sentido de comunidad que he observado y el compromiso de cada una es inspirador, y creo que es el epítome de lo que se requiere para una ciencia más inclusiva. Este grupo, no voy a mencionar nombres porque me corro el riesgo de olvidarme, pero está conformado por profesionales e investigadoras y científicas de CONCITEC, el Comité Pro Mujer en CTI, nuestra coordinadora de CTI del British Council, Advance HE, por supuesto, y especialmente nuestras facilitadoras voluntarias y expertos que compartieron su experiencia con nosotros. Mi reconocimiento, mi agradecimiento a cada una de ustedes por hacer posible este primer paso, como bien lo han dicho. En el British Council trabajamos por la igualdad de género desde hace más de 20 años, y tenemos ahora una plataforma de programas dedicados al empoderamiento de las mujeres y de las niñas. Buscamos el desarrollo de aptitudes, competencias, confianza y oportunidades de vida, basándonos en la evidencia de que el trabajo en pro de la igualdad de género conduce a sociedades más inclusivas, más seguras, prósperas y sostenibles. Para contarles lo que hacemos en el Perú, desde el año 2018, iniciamos un programa llamado Women and Girls in STEM, o Mujeres y Niñas en Ciencia, Tecnología, Ingeniería y Matemáticas. En este marco, el año pasado, el del 2019, y en alianza con el formado Comité Pro Mujer en CTI de CONCITEC, iniciamos una asistencia técnica específica y un fortalecimiento de capacidades de promoción y prácticas de políticas que reduzcan las desigualdades en el ecosistema de CTI. Contábamos en aquel momento con la participación de Porsche Gender in Science del Reino Unido. Fue tan valiosa esta iniciativa que este año, y a pesar de la pandemia, se nos aprobó iniciar en el Perú un programa llamado Promoviendo la Inclusión en el Ecosistema de CTI, en el cual, en alianza con CONCITEC siempre y el Comité Pro Mujer en CTI, apuntamos a reducir las brechas y fortalecer las capacidades de las mujeres científicas e investigadoras, extendiéndolo también, como bien lo han mencionado en los grupos de discusión, a científicos e investigadores de regiones, que no solamente tenemos brechas relacionadas al género, sino también al tema de etnicidad, uso de procedencia, ¿no? Entonces no quiero quitarles más tiempo, nada más comentarles que esta es una iniciativa que nosotros vamos a continuar apoyando y vamos a continuar monitoreando y también midiendo, siempre en alianza con los socios claves que ya mencioné y respondiendo a las prioridades que tenemos como país. Solo para comentarles que en este momento también tenemos en proceso una consultoría con Tecnopolis Group, con el objetivo de hacer un mapeo de iniciativas de género, confirmar brechas, identificar potenciales socios y también prioridades que como British Council vamos a hacer en el Perú y en otros países de la región de América Latina. Finalmente, antes de terminar, quiero compartir con ustedes una buena noticia, que es algo que necesitamos en estos tiempos tan inciertos, y es que como British Council, ampliando el trabajo que ya venimos haciendo, estamos lanzando por primera vez una beca que se llama Beca Women in STEM, para mujeres del sur y del este de Asia y también de América, con el objetivo de ofrecer oportunidades para que las mujeres de estas regiones puedan completar una maestría en un campo STEM. Estamos particularmente interesados en atraer solicitudes de mujeres cuyas identidades incluyan múltiples factores que se entrecruzan, como raza, sexualidad, clase, así como madres solteras. Este programa consiste en 55 becas completas y para nuestra región 30, para que las mujeres estudien a tiempo completo un programa de maestría de 1 año de duración en el Reino Unido. El lanzamiento público se prevé en diciembre y las becarias van a ser seleccionadas en marzo del año 2021 para que inicien sus estudios en septiembre del siguiente año, ¿no? Entonces, con esto quiero simplemente nuevamente agradecer, felicitar a cada uno y cada una de las participantes, animarlos a que continuemos en este proceso y simplemente decir que seguimos aquí para continuar en alianza con ustedes. Muchas gracias.